In this mini lecture, we're going to look at evaluating the support material that you're choosing to use. Now, as said by Abraham Lincoln, don't believe everything you read on the internet just because there's a picture with a quote next to it. Hopefully you've all figured out that there is no way that Abraham Lincoln could have possibly said that. We want to make sure that we understand that just because you find something on the internet doesn't mean that it's true. Sometimes just because you find something in a magazine doesn't mean it's true. Now, I don't want anybody to make themselves crazy thinking about the credibility of the information that they use. We need to have some level of trust in what we read and what we find. But it's always a good idea to be just a little bit skeptical about the information that's out there. So have you ever heard someone tell you that they heard something you think there is no way it could be true? It is good to be a little skeptical about the information that you read and that you hear. There are many instances where we hear only part of the story or that facts are misinterpreted. So let's take a look at some evaluation criteria that you want to use as the speaker when you're considering information. As a speaker, you want to be seen as credible. There are many ways to establish credibility, and one of the ways is by the information that you choose to use in your speech. It's your responsibility to make sure that your sources are credible, that they're accurate, that they're recent, and that they're unbiased, or that at least you are recognizing the bias that is in your source. So what do I mean when I say that the information should be credible? Well, we want the information to be from a trusted source. For example, your speech is about heart disease and you cite information from the American Heart Association and the American Medical Association. If I'm someone sitting in the audience and I listen to this information and you have cited one of these two sources, I would probably evaluate that that information is credible, that those are distinguished organizations, and that I would believe what they said. We want to make sure that the information is accurate, the information is true. Maybe you found similar information in different sources. They were saying the same kinds of things. You want to make sure, when possible, that the information is recent. We don't want it to be too old. We don't want it to be too outdated. Now, I don't have a set criteria of you cannot use information prior to a certain point. Many things depend on your topic. If your speech was going to be about the Eiffel Tower and you happen to have a set of encyclopedias at home from the 1990s and you get some information about when the Eiffel Tower was constructed from those encyclopedias, that would be perfectly fine. However, if you're going to be quoting to me statistics about something, I'm going to want to make sure that that information is fairly recent and updated. The final thing you're going to look at is the bias that might be evident in the source. Does the author have an ulterior motive or something to gain from providing the information? For example, both the American Heart Association and the American Medical Association could be somewhat biased in that they are nonprofit organizations that seek to promote their cause. Bias does not necessarily mean that the information is not credible or accurate or recent. It just means that we need to look at, is there anything with the author, with the source of the information, that could kind of cloud our interpretation of the information. Now, I will share with you that just about everything has bias. Some, though, is much worse than others. I'll give you an example of a speech that I had a student do for a persuasive speech about legalizing marijuana. I will tell you that that topic is not permitted for the persuasive speech because the information that would be gathered and what you would need to do to support your argument would be pretty difficult in an 8 to 10 minute speech. But two sources that were cited during her speech were normal.com. Now you all may not know what Normal is. I'm a little older, so I've been around a little longer. But Normal is an organization that has been in existence for many, many years, and it advocates the legalization and use of marijuana. That source would be a little biased. The other source that was used was hightimes.com. Now, I have not checked out hightimes.com, but just listening to their name tells me that there may be a little bit of bias with that source. That doesn't mean that their information was untrue. It might have been absolutely true, but there was probably some bias and I might have wanted to use a different source. Okay, so something that you're going to need to do with your sources is that you're going to need to complete an annotated bibliography for 2 of the sources you use for both the informative and the persuasive speech. Now, there are 4 parts to an annotated bibliography. You will find examples of annotated bibliographies and descriptions of annotated bibliographies in the Gathering Support Material module, so I highly recommend that you look at those. There are some samples that are contained in some of the speech samples that I give you. 4 parts to this annotated bibliography. First, you have your citation. That's just a normal citation that would be in MLA or APA format. Then you're going to have a summary of the source. A summary of the source is just a few sentences that tell me something about the source that you're using. This was a book that's was written by a renowned veterinarian who was very aware of behavioral characteristics of different dog breeds. Let's say that you were doing something with grooming dogs. Okay. Just a little short summary of the source. The next one is the meat and potatoes of the annotated bibliography. Here you're going to look at credibility, but credibility is broken down into 4 areas. And if you notice, credibility, accuracy, recency, and bias. If I go back to this screen that we talked about just a little while ago, it gives you a nice description of what does that mean, and you want to address each of those areas. The final thing you're going to use in an annotated bibliography is you're going to write in there your oral citation. Your oral citation is the way that you hope to say your source during your speech. Now, you might not say it exactly that way during your speech, but it's how you would practice saying your source. You would want to have information about the author, maybe the title of the article, where it was published. So if I was using an article from the American Heart Association about signals of a heart attack, I could say that on the American Heart Association's website, looking at signs of a heart attack, it is reported that, and then you could go on to report. That tells me your information came from the American Heart Association, the kind of article or area that it came from, and that it was a website. As a listener, that gives me enough information that I can immediately determine if it seems like your information is credible. All right. You must complete annotated bibliography for some of the sources in your speeches. As I said, for the informative speech, you're going to do 2 annotated bibliographies, and for the persuasive speech, you're also going to do 2 annotated bibliographies. All of this information is contained in the speech guidelines and resources module about all of the individual speeches, as well as in the week that the speech is due. That same module is replicated there. An annotated bibliography can be included with your list of works cited, and you must follow the correct format. Lists of works cited are listed in alphabetical order. That is true of MLA or APA format. So perhaps you have a source and the last name starts with a C and it's the first one and you're not annotated that one. You can just put that in regular old MLA format and that's it. Let's say the next one is going to be a source you're going to annotate. You could do this, the citation, the summary, the credibility, the oral citation, right into that works cited document or that works cited last page or perhaps 2 pages in your outline, and then so forth. So that 2 of your sources are annotated bibliographies for both the informative and the persuasive speech. Now you're going to find, like as I said, further explanation and sample annotated bibliography in the lesson content regarding evaluating source materials. So please be sure to review this information and follow the correct structure. Annotated bibliographies will be graded as part of your outline grade. As one final point, I include this. I have a friend whose son is the same age as my son. And at one point, Julian said to her, there are 2.1 lawyers for every person who needs one. I think I need to think about another profession. And my friend said to him, was that accurate? Like, where did you hear that information? And he said, The Simpsons. And my friend said, well, that's not an accurate source. And Julian said, but Lisa said it. It wasn't like it was Homer. The Simpsons would probably not be your best place to look about information regarding how many lawyers there are. So keep a critical eye. It's okay to be a little skeptical, but don't make yourself crazy.